So I like to start out, just really quick going around the room and seeing kind of what people's experiences were for the week, if there's any questions on anything we went over last week, or I posted the reading up this afternoon. So if there's any questions on the reading, I'll probably save those for after we have the lecture portion and I go through what the integration message for the week is and the sort of purpose for it. So, who had sensations this week? Wow, I see some hands. Do you want to talk about those?
I mean, did I have emotions?
Well, it depends on what you call them, right?
Well, I mean, according to the reading, emotions are what I'm feeling, or sensations I'm feeling,
Right.
are emotions.
Yeah. I was gonna say emotional is sensational, but I thought that would be a little too much. I thought people would read into it. And what did you do with your sensations?
Well, describe it in words.
So your question, the question sort of, why do I get happy?
Yeah, why is this making me happy? Is it
Right, right,
music? Is it? I mean, I'm sure it's all of it.
right. And we'll talk about that a lot this week, kind of going into that a little bit more. But really, I think that what happens is that when we're and this will come up in the next few weeks, but when we kind of get ourselves into alignment, right, and we have this sense of like authenticity, and one of the words we could use for that is enjoyment, right, and we start to get into this space of enjoyment, right? And those things start to flow. That's kind of what to me that when you get to that space where like you're experiencing magic, you start to get into alignment, you get into that enjoyment and that sense of being where you're supposed to be. So then you don't feel like you need to be anywhere else, and you probably also didn't feel like you needed to change that situation because it was causing you discomfort.
Right. And of course, I felt moments of discomfort this week as well. Of course, whether it be with work or with children or
Sure,
whatever stuff.
sure.
But so
Yep.
again, but as I mentioned earlier, it's still hard
It
to.
helps, right? If you start your day where you go and do some clearing, do some cleansing, do some alignment work, then when you get triggered later on in the day, it doesn't upset you as much, right? There's a little bit more space there that can be had. We've all had the experience of, um, uh, I'm working hard on a project, I'm late to work, my kids get sick, right? The dog breaks his leg, right? Like, and then my mom calls and she's like, hey, I need you to do this. And all of a sudden, like, all those things stack up. And then, somebody says something about something and you just snap, right? You just lose it. And it's not that thing, right? If that thing existed in isolation, you probably would just be like, hey, I don't like what you said. But because all of those things have stacked up, you react, right? It's like it's a level, it's a balance that we cross. And so, in that same sense, you by meditating morning and night are kind of rebalancing, you're re-leveling each day, which is why it's so important. Because if you can get that consistency and you can build that patterning in, then you can, have more space where, you don't get so triggered, you don't get so deep into whatever sensation that you're having, but you begin to just perceive like, oh, that person did this and now I have this sensation. This is interesting. Maybe I want to look into this, right? Maybe I want to start to sit with this a little bit more. And that's what we'll talk about this week is how do I then, right? It's all groovy when life is, coming up spades, right? And you're just rolling through life. Like, why would you even be here if that was the case, right? I don't think any of you would be here if you had life all figured out and everything was going perfectly, and you were like, oh, I just like to hang out with Jeff, right? Then you're in the right place. But for most of us, there's these spaces within us that are not cool, right? That we're not super comfortable with, that we're not happy with. And so how do we begin to transition those? And how do we begin to get to that place where, like, the universe will never, maybe it will, I don't know, maybe we could get to the point where we can get it to this point where it's just all awesome, right? Maybe we can get there. I think we have a long way to go. But there's always going to be things in our lives that are challenging us, that are bringing up different aspects of growth and maturity that can take place that will be challenging. It's how do we not let those, like really bring us down and fence us in, right? We're all going to go through some tough shit, but you still want to be you, right? You still want to be able to be you and be authentic and move from that space. So that's really a lot of what we'll go into today when we start to talk about this week's topic. Thank you. Jan was saying that when she breathes, when she does that kind of full breath, right? You get this heat, and in yoga they call this tapas, right? It's this heat that kind of it cleanses your samskaras, right? And I love these words like samskara because it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a physical, emotional scar that has taken place, right? And it's something that's ingrained in you that is inauthentic, that is part of the veil of Maya. And so by doing yoga, by doing physical asana practice, you create this heat, this tapas that sort of gets rid of samskara, that it gets rid of illusion. And so when you're doing this breathing, that breathing, that full, complete breath, that big inhale, big exhale, like if you watch like animals, animals don't like hold their breath, right? They just breathe very naturally. They just really breathe without pausing. And when they get scared, they breathe differently. When they get angry, they breathe differently. But animals just kind of breathe. And we as humans, like, because we get into our heads and stuff, like, we'll start to affect our breathing because we're getting into our heads. And then we have these mental sort of loops that we go around in, and we almost just forget to breathe, right? I mean, I've been at work before and been intensely working on something because there's a deadline to hit, and I haven't taken a full breath in 45 minutes, right? And then I'll realize it and I'll take a full breath. And so part of that, like taking the full breath and doing this over and over again, week after week, day after day, is that is an authentic breath, right? That full breath is what you should be able to take all the time without any resistance. But when there's resistance there, it creates heat. And we all have resistance there, right? And so that breath is it's not easy, right? It's challenging to breathe like that for 10 minutes. But what it's doing is it's placing that authenticity into you, where if you can breathe like that for 10 minutes, and just have that freedom to breathe fully in and out without sort of feeling resistance, feeling yourself go into thoughts, feeling yourself go into mental activities, obsession, past and future, as we talked about in week 1, but really be able to be present and just breathe for 10 minutes, like, you're getting there. You're making good progress.
What I find out is, like, my resistance is probably pretty big because now I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? When you give the brain something new, it's like, oh, okay, I have this new thing, I can go play with it. And then it gets bored, and it's like, oh, wait, back to obsessing about problems. That's how I can get you out of this, right? And so, as I said, I think I said this in the first week, but I use the be here now be here for maybe like 2 minutes out of the 10. And the rest of those 8 minutes are really spent just breathing. And I sort of let go of the mantra. I breathe, I feel, and then I see what arises in my mind. So it's sort of thoughts, but if you've been in the meditation before and you're not necessarily like thinking thoughts as much as you're getting perceptions, right? And there might be some perception of like a moment at work that day. There might be a perception of a moment I had with one of my children that day. There might be a perception of a moment I had in elementary school, right? In kindergarten. But I'll get these perceptions, and they might be thoughts. They're kind of on that border, right? Where it's like, is this an explanation, or is it just a sort of perception, right? Just a kind of envisioning. So I still get those, but they're like, I don't usually get too much. It happens, right? I usually can see it as soon as it starts happening. I don't usually get into the laundry list of what I need to do or what I haven't done, right? Which is where a lot of people, when you first start out meditating, you start to get into the laundry list. As soon as you get close to starting to break through the ego self identity, all of a sudden it comes along with a laundry list to sort of distract you. So perfectly normal, right? You just got to keep on riding the wave and keep on working through this and you'll get there. But yeah, good. It's, in one sense, it is the goal. In another sense, it's not the end goal, if that makes sense. And
I feel great afterwards.
Yeah. So the question is, Brent asked if when he sits, he notices that he's not having a lot of thoughts, that he's very much in his body, and he's having a pretty good experience. And is he done? That's what he wants to know. No. And so it, in a sense, it is a good signpost along the way, where you can start to get to a space where the thoughts are not overriding your awareness and your attention of being present in the moment. And I find that some people, when they have like a very strong will, they will be able to stop the thoughts, right? But then once they stop the thoughts, there's kind of this empty space there, which is like, okay, I stopped my thoughts. And that's it, right? It's just like, okay, great, like I stopped my thoughts, now what? And so that's where it goes back to, can I keep that full breath going, right? And with that full breath, and you start to energize yourself, right? And you start to get this energy and pulse this energy through you, right? And if you can start to become a container for greater and greater amounts of energy as you pulse them through you, and you feel your fears and your desires and your illusions and this inner sense sort of dissolving into a pure inner sense that is Brent, right? Then that's when you're there, right? And so you're like, you're halfway there, but there's this other piece to it, which gets more and more intense as you go along. And that's the piece that we'll cover, in the next few weeks. As we started out, we went through, kind of being present in the moment, like getting to know what our physical sensations were, seeing those as emotion, and then this week we'll continue that journey, and through the next few weeks we'll start to move even more into that second piece that I was talking about, which is like cultivating, right? Really starting to just I mean, it's a weird sensation, but it's really starting to create this capacity, which will come up in a few weeks, and really starting to create this pulsation within you that starts to transform you and dissolve all of that emotional residue and kind of the inner sense that is not in alignment with your truest self. It's a lot to unpack, but we'll get there, I promise. Okay. Anything else? Right. Right. And so Josh was saying that, you know, some of the techniques are working for, you know, getting out in front of the reaction from the sensation of the emotion, right? So there's the sensation, there's the emotion, there's the reaction. And a lot of times we can't uncouple those things, right? We just go, boom, right? Sensation, emotion, reaction, boom, done. And as you start to get into your body more, get into feeling emotion as arising, as sensation from the root, from the very beginning, you can start to have more space there. And I just want to say, like, I don't want to make this political, but, like, you know, a lot of shit went down this week in terms of what happened in Las Vegas, and you know, every time, like in my life, like, I've been meditating for a long time. I've been doing self-development work for a long time. Anytime something like this happens, it always makes me think about like what was in that person, right? Like, what was in that person? And it's like, I'm not saying I've ever been there, but what I'm saying is that, like, through my practice, through, like, experiencing my emotions as sensations, through watching the way that things within me can mutate and transform and become completely different than what they originally were. Like, I get how that shit happens, but I'm like, how can we make it so that people have these tools so that as soon as that arises within them, right? Like, because can you imagine the emotion, the sensation that man was experiencing, right? Like, it's aberrant, right? You can't even begin to fathom, right, what that energy must have been like. I mean, like, pure evil, right? Like, coursing through him, right? And it's like, how does what we experience, right, what we go through day in and day out, everything we've experienced, how does it get to that point where that's the only option left, right? Where that emotion, that sensation that's arising within that person all of a sudden becomes guns and shooting into crowds, right? How do you get from here to there? And like you said, right, it's like, if you can't create space anywhere along that path, right, it's just boom, 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 boom. It's sensation, emotion, reaction, right? And it's crazy where his went to, but it's like, I know how that feels, right? I know how that feels, at least in the beginning, right? And so even us doing this work, right? I'm not saying it's preventing you from, you know, becoming a murderer or something, right? But who knows? Maybe it will, right? Like, it's, you know, it's like, who knows? Maybe that will be the case, right? And I'd hate to think that, but it's like that process we're going through every single day. And I mean, his went to a level that I will never, you know, fully understand, but like, each and every day we're doing that in and of ourselves with this, you know, pathway of sort of reaction that if we don't uncouple it, we'll end up in places where, you know, we don't even know who we are anymore, right? All the people you talk to about that guy, I can't believe he would do something like that. Like, I can't believe he'd do something like that. And it's like, well, you know, neither could he, right? And I'm sure what was doing that, the energy that had accumulated, that had evolved, that had developed, was not what that person was, right? Was not what that person originally intended to be. It's like that. It dilutes us and it dissolves us and it distorts us so much that we end up not even knowing who we are anymore. And so, I'll talk about that a little bit more today. And if there's not anything else in terms of experiences this week, I know that that triggered the shit out of me. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I've worked a lot on my personal self to get to the point where I'm at. And now I feel like a lot of the work I'm doing in my life and what's arising for me in the world is how do I take on some of these bigger issues, right? How do I get involved more and take on more of these issues that we've inherited as a society, right? As a culture, as Americans. How do I start to take on and integrate those things? I don't get upset at my coworkers anymore because they're lazy, right? Like I'm beyond that, right? And I feel like I'm doing everything around the office and they just can't, right? I'm beyond that. But there is this there is this level that we start to get through. Is that like, okay, I've integrated a lot of my own stuff, but there's still a lot of stuff out there, right? There's a whole bigger universe and world that I need to integrate as well. That if I don't come to some semblance of balance with those things and some semblance of feeling like, I can be with those things without getting pulled out of myself and distorted, then I still have work to do, right? I still have work to do. So I'll leave it at that on that topic of the bigger world stuff, because I want you to for sure focus on you guys here. I know you all wrote down your thing at the beginning of class, right, at the beginning of the program, and I hope you're coming back to that, right? I hope that's something that you're checking in with, weekly, if not daily, in terms of, are you continuing along that path? Is it being unbundled and